Picture this, you're 7 months pregnant, living in a glass mansion overlooking the Pacific, married to a charming tech millionaire who seems perfect in every way. But then you discover something on his laptop that changes everything. Encrypted messages revealing your husband isn't just building apps. He's laundering $50 million for Mexican drug cartels. What happens next will shock you, because when Isabella Morrison Hayes tried to gather evidence against her criminal husband, she triggered a chain of events that would cost her everything she held dear. A violent confrontation at the top of a spiral staircase, a father's military precision revenge that spans 2 states, federal agents, corrupt cops, and cartel assassins all converging on one terrifying night. But here's what makes this story unforgettable. Isabella's father isn't just any concerned parent. He's a retired military colonel with 30 years of intelligence experience and the resources of a defense contracting empire. When Marcus Hayes pushed his pregnant daughter down those marble stairs, he didn't just commit assault, he declared war on a man who knows exactly how to destroy enemies completely and permanently. This is the true story of how a tech entrepreneur's greed turned into the biggest mistake of his criminal career, and why you should never underestimate the power of a military family when they decide to fight back. The storm clouds gathering over Austin's skyline seemed to mirror the tension building inside the 57th floor penthouse. Isabella Morrison Hayes pressed her palm against the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching lightning fork across the darkening Texas sky. At 7 months pregnant, she moved more carefully now, but tonight something else made her steps cautious, the encrypted messages she'd discovered on Marcus's laptop just minutes before. Her husband's voice echoed from the marble foyer below. "Izzy, I'm back early," Marcus called out, his footsteps sharp against the polished stone. She had maybe 30 seconds before he reached their home office. The laptop screen still glowed with the conversation that had made her blood run cold. Code names, dollar amounts in the millions, references to cleaning money through his app development company. Marcus Hayes, her charming tech entrepreneur husband, wasn't just building the next billion-dollar startup. He was laundering drug money. "Coming, honey," she called back, her engineering training kicking in. Document first, analyze later. Her phone's camera captured screen after screen of evidence before she closed the laptop and placed it exactly where she'd found it. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his 6-foot frame filling the space. Even after 2 years of marriage, he still took her breath away. Dark hair perfectly styled, expensive suit tailored to perfection, smile that had charmed investors out of hundreds of millions. Tonight, though, something predatory lurked behind his green eyes. "Working late again?" he asked, loosening his silk tie. His gaze swept the room, lingering on the laptop's position. "Just reviewing the structural plans for the new office building," Izzy replied, her hand instinctively moving to her rounded belly. "Baby's been kicking like crazy. I think she's going to be an engineer like her mom." Marcus's smile faltered for just a moment. "She, or he? You know what I mean." Izzy forced herself to sound normal, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. "How was Dallas? Did the investors bite?" "They always do." Marcus moved closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something else, fear, suspicion. "You seem jumpy tonight. Everything okay?" The question hung in the air like the electricity before a lightning strike. This was the man she'd fallen in love with at a tech conference in San Francisco, the self-made millionaire who'd swept her off her feet with grand gestures and bigger dreams. The man who'd proposed on a beach in Malibu and promised her the world. "Just tired," she said. "Pregnancy brain. You know." Marcus stepped behind her desk chair, his hands settling on her shoulders. What once felt protective now felt possessive. "You haven't been sleeping well," he murmured, his thumbs working at the tension in her neck. "Maybe you should take a break from work. Focus on getting ready for the baby." The suggestion carried weight beyond mere concern. Over the past months, Marcus had been subtly isolating her, encouraging her to work from home instead of her downtown engineering firm, suggesting they skip social gatherings with her friends, even questioning her weekly calls with her father. "I'm fine, Marcus. Really?" His hands stilled on her shoulders. "Good, because I'd hate for you to stress yourself out over nothing. Stress isn't good for the baby." The words sounded like a warning. Thunder crashed outside, and in the sudden darkness between lightning flashes, Izzy glimpsed their reflection in the window, a pregnant woman trapped in the grip of a man whose true nature she was only beginning to understand. "I should call Dad," she said, testing the waters. "He's been worried since my last checkup showed elevated blood pressure." Marcus's hands tightened imperceptibly. "Your father worries too much. Colonel Morrison needs to learn that you're my responsibility now." The way he said "my responsibility" made her skin crawl. This wasn't the loving husband she'd married. This was someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. "I think I'll head to bed early," Izzy said, standing carefully. "This storm's giving me a headache." "Good idea." Marcus's voice followed her toward the door. "Oh, and Izzy, next time you want to use my laptop, just ask. I keep important business files on there. Wouldn't want you accidentally deleting something crucial." She froze in the doorway. He knew. Somehow, he knew she'd been looking. "Of course," she managed. "Good night, Marcus." As she climbed the spiral staircase to their bedroom, Izzy's mind raced through possibilities. The evidence on her phone could destroy Marcus's criminal empire, but it could also destroy her. A millionaire with cartel connections wouldn't hesitate to eliminate threats, even if that threat was carrying his child. Behind her, Marcus's voice carried up the stairs, cold and final. "Sweet dreams, darling. Tomorrow's going to be a very interesting day." Morning brought no relief from the storm, either the one raging outside or the one brewing inside their marriage. Izzy woke to an empty bed and the sound of Marcus on a conference call downstairs, his voice carrying that particular tone he used when discussing sensitive business matters. She'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, formulating and discarding escape plans. Her father, retired Colonel Robert Morrison, lived just 2 hours away in San Antonio. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, her best friend from MIT, worked at Austin General Hospital. She had options, support systems Marcus hadn't managed to destroy yet. But first, she needed more evidence. The encrypted messages on her phone were damning, but any defense attorney worth their fee could claim they were fabricated. She needed something concrete, undeniable bank records, shipping manifests, anything that proved Marcus Hayes was more than just another tech success story. "Morning, beautiful," Marcus said as she entered the kitchen. He stood at the marble island, perfectly dressed despite the early hour, scrolling through his phone with one hand while stirring coffee with the other. "Sleep well. Like a baby," she lied, accepting the mug he offered. The coffee was perfect exactly the way she liked it, with just a touch of cream and honey. Marcus remembered details like that, which made his deception even more chilling. "I have to fly out to Houston today," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. Potential merger discussion with a gaming company might be gone overnight. This was her chance to gather real evidence while he was away. "That sounds exciting. The baby and I will miss you." Something flickered across his face at the mention of the baby. "About that, I've been thinking we should hire a private security firm. With the business growing so fast, I worry about our safety." "Security, Marcus. We live in one of the safest buildings in Austin. Humor me." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I've already contacted a firm. They'll start this week." The trap was closing around her, piece by careful piece. First isolation, now surveillance disguised as protection. How long before concern for her delicate condition became outright imprisonment? "I should get going," Marcus said, checking his Rolex. "Don't wait up if I'm late getting back tomorrow." He kissed her forehead, a gesture that once melted her heart, but now made her skin crawl. After his departure, Izzy waited exactly 1 hour before moving into action. Marcus's home office occupied a corner of their penthouse with commanding views of downtown Austin. The space reflected his personality: minimalist, expensive, and carefully controlled. His laptop sat locked in a drawer, but Izzy's engineering background included a minor in computer science. Breaking into his system took less than 20 minutes. What she found exceeded her worst fears. Hayes Development Solutions wasn't just laundering money. It was the digital hub for a sophisticated criminal network spanning 3 states. Marcus's apps provided perfect cover for moving dirty cash. A meditation app with in-app purchases allowed cartels to buy premium features with drug profits. A fitness tracking app let dealers invest in virtual personal training sessions. The money flowed in dirty and came out clean, ready for legitimate investment. But the real shock came when she found the communications with his partners. Victoria Sterling, listed as a business consultant, was clearly much more than that based on their intimate messages. Worse, Detective Ray Thompson from Austin PD appeared regularly on the payroll, ensuring investigations went nowhere. Izzy photographed everything, her hands shaking as she documented the scope of her husband's criminal empire. $50 million in the past year alone. Connections to Mexican cartels, corrupt officials, and a network of shell companies that made her head spin. A sound from the foyer made her freeze footsteps on marble, too heavy to be the cleaning service. "Mrs. Hayes," an unfamiliar voice called out. "Security company, your husband asked us to start today." Her blood turned to ice. Marcus had lied about Houston. This wasn't coincidence, this was a trap. He knew she discovered his secrets, and now he was making sure she couldn't act on that knowledge. "Just a moment," she called back, frantically closing files and clearing browser history. The laptop went back in its drawer, locked and positioned exactly as she'd found it. Two men in dark suits stood in her foyer when she emerged from the office. They looked like corporate security, but their eyes held the cold calculation of soldiers or killers. "Mrs. Hayes, I'm Jim Patterson with Apex Security Solutions. Your husband contracted us to provide personal protection services." "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake," Izzy said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "My husband's in Houston on business. We didn't discuss any security arrangements." Patterson's smile was as genuine as plastic flowers. "He called this morning. Apparently there have been some threats against tech executives in the area. He's concerned for your safety, especially with the baby coming." The lie was smooth, practiced. These weren't security guards, they were Marcus's insurance policy, her prison guards. "That's very thoughtful," she managed, "but I'm fine on my own. Perhaps you could start tomorrow when my husband returns." "I'm afraid Mr. Hayes was quite insistent we begin immediately." Patterson's partner, a mountain of a man who hadn't spoken, positioned himself between Izzy and the door. "Don't worry, Mrs. Hayes, you won't even notice we're here." But she would notice. She'd notice every lost opportunity to escape, every blocked phone call to her father or Dr. Mitchell, every step toward the invisible cage Marcus was building around her. As Patterson and his silent partner settled into her home, like occupying forces, Izzy felt the walls closing in. The evidence burning in her phone meant nothing if she couldn't get it to someone who could act on it. Her husband wasn't just a criminal, he was smart enough to stay 3 moves ahead of everyone else. The baby kicked inside her, and Izzy placed a protective hand over her belly. Whatever Marcus Hayes was planning, she wouldn't let him destroy their child's future. But first, she had to survive long enough to fight back. Outside, the storm raged on. Marcus returned the next evening with flowers and apologies, playing the part of the concerned husband to perfection. The security team had become invisible fixtures in their home, always present but never intrusive, like well-trained predators waiting for the right moment to strike. "Houston went better than expected," he said over dinner, his charm restored to its full wattage. "The merger's looking very promising. We might be looking at a $100 million deal." More dirty money disguised as legitimate business, Izzy thought, forcing herself to smile and nod. "That's wonderful, honey. There's just one small complication." Marcus set down his fork, suddenly serious. "Some of my investors are getting nervous about regulatory scrutiny. With all the new oversight on tech companies, they want assurance that everything's squeaky clean." The words carried subtext that made her stomach clench. "What kind of assurance?" "Internal audit, complete review of all our systems, files, communications." His green eyes fixed on hers with laser intensity. "They want to make sure there are no surprises that could derail the deal." Izzy felt the noose tightening. An audit would uncover her digital trespassing, reveal that she'd accessed files meant to stay buried. "That sounds thorough. Very thorough. They're bringing in specialists who can recover deleted files, trace access logs, even pull data from phones and personal devices." Marcus reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "Nothing to worry about, of course. We've got nothing to hide." The threat was clear. He knew about her phone, knew about the evidence she'd gathered. The audit was theater, a way to discover and eliminate anything that could threaten him. "When does this audit start?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would be soon. "Tomorrow morning. I thought it would be best to get ahead of it. Show we're proactive about compliance." Izzy excused herself to the bathroom, her mind racing. 24 hours to act, maybe less. The security team would never let her leave the building, and Marcus had undoubtedly disabled her access to their accounts and communications. But she still had one advantage he might have overlooked. Her father's military training had taught her to always have an exit strategy. The pregnancy complicated everything. At 7 months, she couldn't run far or fast, and any escape attempt would have to account for the baby's safety. But staying meant certain death for both of them once Marcus decided she was too dangerous to keep alive. She returned to the dining room to find Marcus on his phone, speaking in low tones to someone who was clearly not a business associate. The conversation ended abruptly when he saw her. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Just confirming some details for tomorrow." His smile held a sharp edge. "You should get some rest, darling. Big day ahead." That night, Izzy lay awake listening to Marcus's steady breathing beside her, every instinct screaming that this might be her last chance. The phone with the evidence remained hidden in her jewelry box, but it would do no good if she couldn't get it to someone who mattered. Dawn brought a team of auditors who looked more like forensic investigators than accountants. They swarmed through the penthouse with military precision, setting up equipment and asking pointed questions about access logs and device synchronization. Marcus played the cooperative business owner, but Izzy caught him watching her with predatory focus. When she tried to slip away to make coffee, Patterson materialized at her elbow like a dark shadow. "Allow me, Mrs. Hayes. You should rest." Rest was the last thing on her mind. The auditors were closing in on her digital footprints, and Marcus was positioning pieces on a chessboard she was only beginning to understand. The breaking point came at 3 in the afternoon. "Marcus, we need to talk." The lead auditor, a thin man with calculating eyes, gestured toward the office. "We found some interesting access anomalies in your system." Izzy's blood turned to ice. They'd found her intrusion, traced her activities back to files she should never have seen. Marcus's face remained perfectly composed, but she caught the flash of fury in his eyes before he nodded and followed the auditor. 20 minutes later, Marcus emerged from the office alone. The auditors packed their equipment with unusual haste and left without a word of explanation. In the sudden silence of their penthouse, Izzy faced her husband across the marble expanse of their living room. "Interesting day," Marcus said softly. "The audit went well." She managed, "Oh, very well. We found exactly what we were looking for." He moved closer, each step deliberate and predatory. "It's amazing what digital forensics can uncover. Files accessed without authorization, phones used to photograph sensitive documents, even the exact timestamps of industrial espionage." Izzy's heart hammered against her ribs. "Marcus, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "My pregnant wife, sneaking through my private files like a common thief, taking photos of confidential business documents, preparing to betray the man who gave her everything. I was trying to understand. You were trying to destroy me." The mask finally slipped, revealing the monster beneath. Marcus's face contorted with rage, his carefully controlled facade cracking like ice under pressure. "Did you think I was stupid that I wouldn't notice my own wife spying on me?" Izzy backed toward the spiral staircase, her hand protective over her belly. "Marcus, please, let's talk about this rationally." "Rationally?" He laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "You want rational? Here's rational. My business associates don't forgive security breaches. They eliminate them." The words hit her like physical blows. "You're threatening your own child." "My child?" Marcus followed her up the stairs, his voice echoing in the vaulted space. "How do I even know it's mine? Maybe you've been spreading your legs for more than just information." "That's enough." Izzy's voice cracked like a whip, years of suppressed anger finally breaking free. "I loved you, Marcus. I believed in you. I helped you build this company with my engineering expertise, my connections, my trust, and this is how you repay me." They'd reached the top of the spiral staircase, the marble steps gleaming like polished bone beneath them. The height made her dizzy, or maybe that was fear and adrenaline coursing through her system. "You helped me." Marcus's eyes blazed with narcissistic fury. "I built this empire myself. You were just window dressing the perfect wife to make me look respectable. But now you're a liability, and I don't keep liabilities around." "I won't let you hurt this baby," Izzy said, backing against the glass railing. Below them, the living room stretched out like a minimalist canyon, all sharp edges and unforgiving surfaces. The baby's the only reason you're still breathing, Marcus snarled, advancing on her. But even that protection has limits. Accidents happen to pregnant women all the time. Tragic falls downstairs, heart attacks from stress. So many ways for problems to just disappear. Izzy saw death in his eyes, cold, calculated, and utterly without remorse. This was the man she'd married, the father of her unborn child, and he was planning to murder them both. Marcus, don't! His hands came up fast, striking her chest with brutal force. The world tilted, gravity taking hold as her feet left the marble landing. For one terrifying moment, she was airborne, seeing Marcus's contorted face framed against the ceiling lights. Then she was falling, tumbling down the unforgiving steps in a cascade of pain and terror. Her last conscious thought was a prayer for her baby's life as darkness claimed her. Above her, Marcus Hayes stared down at his handiwork, already formulating the story he'd tell the police about his wife's tragic accident. Isabella Morrison Hayes drifted back to consciousness in fragments, the steady beep of monitors, the antiseptic smell of hospital air, and pain radiating through every nerve in her body. When she finally managed to open her eyes, the first face she saw was her father's, etched with a fury that could have melted steel. Colonel Robert Morrison sat ramrod straight in the visitor's chair, his weathered hands clenched into fists on his knees. At 58, he still carried himself like the military officer he'd been for 30 years, but grief had carved new lines around his ice-blue eyes. "Dad," her voice came out as barely a whisper. "Easy, sweetheart." Waiting, he moved to her bedside, his voice gentling as he took her uninjured hand. "You're safe now. You're at Austin General." The memories crashed back like a second fall, Marcus's rage, the confrontation at the top of the stairs, the moment of weightless terror before impact. Her free hand moved instinctively to her belly, finding it flatter than it should be. "The baby," she whispered, though she already knew the answer from her father's expression. "I'm sorry, Izzy. The fall caused placental abruption. The doctors did everything they could, but—" Robert's voice broke slightly. "Your daughter didn't make it." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Her daughter, the little girl who'd kicked so vigorously just days before, who'd responded to music and her father's voice, who'd been due to arrive in just 2 months. Gone. "I'm going to kill him," Robert said quietly, his voice carrying the flat certainty of a man who'd ended lives before in service to his country. "Dad, no." Izzy struggled to focus through the haze of grief and pain medication. "You can't. It'll destroy your life too. My life." Robert's laugh held no humor. "That bastard murdered my granddaughter and tried to kill my daughter. My life doesn't matter anymore." "Yes, it does." She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had. "He has to pay, but not like that. Promise me you won't do anything stupid." Robert Morrison had spent 3 decades in military intelligence before transitioning to the defense contracting world. He knew a dozen ways to make Marcus Hayes disappear without leaving a trace. But looking at his broken daughter, he also knew she needed him free, not in prison for revenge. "I promise," he said finally. "But that doesn't mean he walks away from this." A soft knock interrupted them. Dr. Sarah Mitchell entered, her usually bright demeanor subdued by professional concern and personal grief. She'd been Izzy's roommate at MIT, her maid of honor, and the one person who'd consistently warned her about Marcus's controlling tendencies. "How are you feeling?" Sarah asked, though her medical training had already cataloged the obvious injuries: broken ribs, fractured wrist, severe bruising, and internal trauma that would require weeks of recovery. "Like I fell down a flight of marble stairs," Izzy replied, attempting dark humor to mask her devastation. "The police want to interview you when you're ready," Sarah said carefully. "Detective Ray Thompson from Austin PD. He's been very concerned about the circumstances." Robert's expression hardened. "Thompson, I'll handle him." Something in his tone made both women look at him sharply. "Dad, what aren't you telling me?" "Nothing you need to worry about right now. Focus on getting better." But Izzy's engineering mind was already connecting pieces. "Marcus has connections in the police department. He mentioned having protection from investigators. That's why we're not trusting local law enforcement alone," Robert said grimly. "I've made some calls to old friends in federal agencies, real investigators who can't be bought." The door opened again, and Marcus Hayes entered with a bouquet of roses and an Oscar-worthy performance of the grieving husband. He looked perfectly devastated, expensive suit slightly wrinkled, eyes red-rimmed with what could have been tears or contact lens solution. "Oh, thank God you're awake," he said, rushing to her bedside before Robert could intercept him. "I was so scared I'd lost you too." The casual reference to their dead daughter made Izzy's stomach turn. "Don't," she whispered. "The doctors say you don't remember the fall," Marcus continued, his voice pitched for the nurses who might be listening. "You were so dizzy lately, probably from the pregnancy. I should have installed better railings on those stairs." His performance was flawless, the concerned husband tormented by guilt over his wife's tragic accident. But Izzy saw the calculation in his eyes, the way he positioned himself to block her father's direct line to her bed. "I remember everything," she said clearly. Marcus's facade flickered for just a moment. "The doctors said head trauma can cause false memories. Darling, you've been through such an ordeal. Get out!" Robert's voice cut through Marcus's act like a blade. "Get out before I do something we'll both regret." "I understand you're upset, Robert," Marcus replied smoothly. "We're all grieving, but Izzy is still my wife, and I have every right to be here. The woman you pushed down the stairs, the woman I rushed to the hospital after finding her unconscious at the bottom of our staircase," Marcus corrected. "I know you need someone to blame for this tragedy, but accidents happen. The important thing now is Izzy's recovery." Dr. Mitchell stepped between them before the confrontation could escalate. "Gentlemen, my patient needs rest. Visiting hours are over." Marcus leaned down to kiss Izzy's forehead, whispering so only she could hear, "Remember, darling, accidents can happen anywhere, even in hospitals." After he left, the room felt like a storm front had passed. Robert stared at the closed door with the expression of a man planning war. "He threatened me," Izzy said quietly. "Just now. He's not going to let this go to trial." "Neither am I," her father replied. "I've been making calls since you were brought in. Marcus Hayes thinks he's untouchable, but he's about to learn what real power looks like." Sarah checked the monitors, her expression troubled. "Izzy, there's something else. The injuries you sustained, there was significant internal damage. The emergency surgery saved your life. But what?" Sarah's medical training warred with her friendship. But truth won out. "You won't be able to have children? I'm sorry." The words landed like another physical blow. Not only had Marcus killed their daughter, he'd stolen any chance of future children. The full scope of his destruction was finally clear. He hadn't just attempted murder. He'd annihilated her dreams of motherhood. "Now do you understand why I want him dead?" Robert asked quietly. Izzy closed her eyes, feeling something cold and hard forming in her chest where hope used to live. When she opened them again, her father saw something new in her expression, a reflection of his own capacity for calculated vengeance. "No," she said, "I don't want him dead. I want him to lose everything he's ever valued, everything he's ever worked for. I want him to feel exactly as helpless and broken as he made me feel." Robert Morrison smiled for the first time since arriving at the hospital. His daughter wasn't just a victim anymore. She was becoming a soldier in a war Marcus Hayes didn't even know had started. "That," he said, "can be arranged." 3 days after the fall, Detective Ray Thompson finally arrived for Izzy's official statement. He was exactly what she'd expected from Marcus's casual mentions, a career cop more interested in closing cases than finding truth, with the soft look of someone who'd grown comfortable with cutting corners. "Mrs. Hayes, I know this is difficult," Thompson began, settling his bulk into the visitor's chair with practiced sympathy. "But we need to understand what happened that night," Robert Morrison observed from the corner, his presence officially explained as a concerned father, but actually serving as Izzy's protection. He'd spent the previous 2 days making very specific phone calls to very specific people. "I remember everything, Detective," Izzy said clearly. "My husband and I were arguing at the top of our staircase. He became violent and pushed me down the stairs." Thompson's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Head trauma can cause memory issues. Mrs. Hayes, your husband described finding you unconscious after what appeared to be a tragic accident. Are you suggesting my daughter is lying?" Robert's voice carried the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Of course not. Colonel Morrison, I'm just noting that domestic situations can be complicated. Sometimes people misinterpret accidents as intentional acts, especially when emotions are running high. Izzy studied Thompson's face, seeing the corruption Marcus had paid for. Did my husband tell you about his business activities? Detective, Mr. Hayes runs a successful tech company, very respected in the community. A tech company that launders $50 million annually for Mexican drug cartels. Thompson's mask slipped for just a moment, a flicker of panic before professional composure reasserted itself. That's a very serious accusation. Mrs. Hayes, do you have any evidence to support such claims? As a matter of fact, she does. The voice from the doorway made everyone turn. A woman in a dark suit entered, flashing FBI credentials. Agent Linda Rodriguez was everything Detective Thompson wasn't: sharp, professional, and incorruptible. Agent Rodriguez, FBI Financial Crimes Division, she announced. We've been investigating Hayes Development Solutions for several months. Mrs. Hayes, we understand you may have information relevant to our case. Thompson stood quickly. Now wait just a minute. This is Austin PD jurisdiction. Money laundering across state lines makes it federal jurisdiction. Rodriguez interrupted smoothly. Mrs. Hayes, your father contacted my supervisor yesterday. He mentioned you might have documentary evidence of criminal activity. Robert moved to his daughter's bedside. The phone is in her jewelry box at home. Everything she discovered is on there. That evidence was obtained illegally, Thompson protested. A wife going through her husband's private files. A wife discovering her husband's criminal enterprise, Rodriguez corrected, which she has every right to report. Detective Thompson, I'm curious, how many domestic violence cases have you investigated involving Mr. Hayes? The question was a trap, and Thompson walked right into it. This is the first incident I'm aware of. Interesting. Our investigation suggests otherwise. Rodriguez pulled out a tablet, scrolling through files. Sarah Chen, assault charges filed and mysteriously dropped. Angela Martinez, protective order requested and somehow denied. 3 other women, all with connections to Hayes Development Solutions, all with complaints that disappeared into bureaucratic limbo. Izzy felt sick. She wasn't Marcus's first victim, just his most recent. How many other women had he hurt while police like Thompson looked the other way? I want to cooperate fully with your investigation, Izzy said firmly. Whatever you need, Rodriguez smiled grimly. We need your testimony and access to that evidence. But first, we need to address the elephant in the room. She turned to Thompson. Detective, you've received $17,000 in consulting fees from Hayes Development Solutions over the past 18 months. Care to explain? Thompson's face flushed red. That was legitimate security consulting work. For a tech company that develops meditation apps, Rodriguez's skepticism was withering. I think your definition of legitimate might need some adjustment. The room fell silent except for the steady beep of medical monitors. Thompson realized his position was untenable, his corruption exposed, his career effectively over. Desperation made him dangerous. You people don't understand what you're dealing with, he said, standing and backing toward the door. Marcus Hayes has connections you can't imagine. This investigation dies here, or people start dying, starting with her. The threat was clear and stupid, made in front of a federal agent and recorded by hospital security cameras. Rodriguez didn't even blink. Detective Thompson, you're under arrest for accepting bribes, obstruction of justice, and threatening a federal witness. What followed was a carefully choreographed dance of federal jurisdiction, trumping local corruption. Thompson was led away in handcuffs while Rodriguez took Izzy's complete statement about the assault and the financial evidence she'd discovered. Your husband will be arrested within 24 hours, Rodriguez assured her. We have enough evidence to charge him with money laundering, conspiracy, and attempted murder. But as the agent left, Robert Morrison's expression remained troubled. He'd seen enough military operations to know that winning the first battle didn't guarantee victory in the war. What is it? Dad, Marcus Hayes isn't the type to go quietly. He'll have contingency plans, escape routes, ways to eliminate problems. Robert moved to the window, scanning the parking lot below with professional paranoia. Thompson was right about one thing: we're dealing with people who kill to protect their interests. As if summoned by his words, Izzy's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Accidents can happen to anyone. anywhere, even retired colonels who meddle in other people's business. The message was followed by a photo her father entering the hospital that morning, crosshairs digitally superimposed over his chest. "Dad, look at this." Robert read the message, his face hardening into military readiness. "He's escalating. Good. Good. How is death threats? Good. Because desperate people make mistakes. And when Marcus Hayes makes his next mistake, I'll be ready for him." Robert Morrison pulled out his own phone, scrolling through a contact list that read like a who's who of military intelligence and private security contractors. The war Marcus had started by pushing his daughter down those stairs was about to expand beyond anything the young criminal could have imagined. But wars required sacrifice, and Robert could see in his daughter's eyes that she was beginning to understand the true cost of seeking justice against someone with nothing left to lose. Outside, storm clouds gathered once again over Austin, as if the city itself was bracing for the battle to come. Marcus Hayes had built his criminal empire on careful planning and calculated risks, but FBI handcuffs around his wrists represented a variable he hadn't accounted for. The arrest at his office was deliberately public federal agents swarming through Hayes Development Solutions, while news cameras captured every moment for the evening broadcast. His defense attorney, Patricia Vance, was worth every dollar of her $1,000 per hour fee. Within 6 hours, Marcus was released on $2 million bail, electronically monitored but free to prepare his defense. He returned to the penthouse that night to find it transformed into a crime scene evidence tags marking locations. Furniture moved, his carefully ordered world in chaos. "They took everything," Victoria Sterling said, emerging from the bedroom they'd shared whenever Izzy was away. At 50, Victoria was still stunning, with the kind of predatory beauty that attracted weak men and destroyed strong ones. "Computers, phones, financial records, even your backup drives." Marcus poured himself 3 fingers of 30-year-old scotch, his hands remarkably steady for someone facing life in federal prison. "Expected. We planned for this contingency." "Did we plan for your wife surviving?" Victoria's voice carried an edge that made Marcus look up sharply. "Because that wasn't supposed to happen." The accusation hung between them like a loaded gun. Marcus had always been the brains of their operation. Victoria, the ruthless enforcer who handled problems that couldn't be solved with charm or money. If she was questioning his competence, their partnership was fracturing at the worst possible moment. "Izzy was handled appropriately given the circumstances," Marcus replied carefully. "Her survival actually works in our favor. Dead wives generate more sympathy than injured ones. Dead wives also can't testify in federal court." The conversation was interrupted by Marcus's phone, a burner device Victoria had provided after the FBI seized his regular communications. The caller ID showed only a number, but Marcus recognized the voice immediately. "You have created problems," the man said without preamble. His English was accented with the particular cadence of Sinaloa cartel leadership. "Our arrangement requires discretion. Federal attention is not discretion." "The situation is contained," Marcus assured him, though sweat beaded on his forehead. "My legal team will resolve this quietly." "Your legal team cannot resolve bullets. Mr. Hayes, we have invested significantly in your operation. That investment requires protection." The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at a phone that had just delivered his death sentence. The cartel's patience had limits, and federal indictments tested those limits severely. "How bad?" Victoria asked, reading his expression. "They want the operation shut down." "Permanently." Victoria moved to the window, looking out at the Austin skyline where Marcus had once imagined building a legitimate empire. "Then we accelerate the timeline, transfer the remaining assets, activate the escape protocols, and disappear." "What about Izzy? What about her?" Victoria's reflection in the glass was cold as winter. "She's a federal witness now. The cartel will handle that problem for us." Marcus felt something twist in his chest, not quite conscience, but a recognition that his wife's death would be the final step in his transformation from ambitious entrepreneur to full-fledged monster. The baby's death had been collateral damage, but ordering Izzy's assassination would be conscious choice. "There might be another way," he said slowly, "such as, her father, Colonel Morrison is the real threat. military intelligence background, defense contractor connections, the kind of man who knows how to wage war. Remove him, and Izzy becomes just another grieving widow with a story nobody will believe. Victoria turned from the window, interest replacing skepticism in her expression. You want to kill a retired military officer with federal protection. I want to eliminate a threat to our organization using the same methods we've always used, make it look like an accident, ensure there's no blowback. The plan that emerged over the next hour was elegantly simple. Robert Morrison lived alone in a secured compound outside San Antonio, but he had to travel to Austin regularly to visit his daughter. Highway accidents happened every day, especially to men driving alone at night on isolated stretches of Texas interstate. Thompson's arrest complicates things, Victoria noted. We've lost our inside source with Austin PD, but gained credibility for our innocence, Marcus countered. If a corrupt cop was covering up for us, obviously we must be victims of his scheme rather than partners. They worked through the details with the same methodical approach they'd once applied to money laundering schemes. Vehicle surveillance, traffic pattern analysis, mechanical sabotage designed to cause fatal crashes at specific locations. It was the kind of operation Victoria excelled at: clinical, efficient, and utterly without mercy. At 2 a.m, Marcus made the call that would set everything in motion. His contact was a mechanic who specialized in automotive accidents for various criminal organizations. The price was $50,000, paid in untraceable cryptocurrency. Make it look random, Marcus instructed. Tire blowout on a curve, brake failure on a hill, something that won't trigger suspicious investigation. When the mechanic asked, Marcus checked his watch. Robert Morrison would be driving back to San Antonio in 8 hours, taking his usual route along Highway 35. Tonight, between Austin and San Antonio. The target drives a black Mercedes sedan, license plate November Mike 747. After ending the call, Marcus felt the familiar rush that came with successful problem solving. In 12 hours, Robert Morrison would be dead, Izzy would be alone and vulnerable, and the federal case would lose its primary support structure. You're enjoying this, Victoria observed. I'm surviving this. There's a difference. But there wasn't, really. Marcus Hayes had crossed every line that separated him from the men who paid for his services. The transformation was complete from husband to criminal to killer, each step justified by the one before it. He didn't notice the small device Victoria had attached to his burner phone during their planning session, or the fact that every word of their conversation was being transmitted to a federal surveillance team 3 blocks away. Agent Rodriguez had been prepared for desperate measures, but even she was shocked by the casual brutality of Marcus's plan to murder his father-in-law. The recording would provide additional federal charges and demonstrate the scope of criminal conspiracy. More importantly, it gave them 8 hours to save Robert Morrison's life and set their own trap for the man who thought he was hunting them. Marcus Hayes had made his final mistake, though he wouldn't realize it until the handcuffs clicked shut for the second and final time. Robert Morrison had survived 3 decades of military operations by trusting his instincts when something felt wrong. Driving south on Highway 35 at 11 p.m., every instinct he possessed was screaming danger. The traffic pattern was wrong, too few cars for a Friday night, with suspicious vehicles maintaining exact distances behind him. His phone buzzed with a call from Agent Rodriguez. Colonel Morrison, do not return home tonight. We have credible intelligence of an imminent threat to your life. What kind of threat? Robert asked, though he was already taking the next exit ramp. Marcus Hayes hired someone to cause a fatal accident on your route home. We have the entire conversation recorded. You need to disappear until we can neutralize the threat. Robert pulled into a well-lit truck stop, parking where security cameras could capture every angle. How do you want to handle this? We're going to let them think they succeeded. The plan Agent Rodriguez outlined was audacious in its simplicity. Robert Morrison would officially die in a car accident tonight, complete with stage crash scene, body burned beyond recognition, and death certificate filed with appropriate authorities. Meanwhile, the real Robert Morrison would be relocated to a federal safe house under witness protection. The goal is to make Marcus believe he's eliminated his primary threat while we build an airtight case against him, Rodriguez explained. But it means you'll be legally dead for several weeks, possibly months. What about Izzy? She'll be told the truth, but everyone else, including hospital staff, media, and Marcus's surveillance network will believe you're dead. Her grief will be genuine because she'll be mourning your legal death while knowing you're actually alive. It was exactly the kind of psychological warfare Robert had specialized in during his military career. Let the enemy think they'd won while positioning pieces for a devastating counterattack. 2 hours later, Highway 35 became the scene of a spectacular single-car accident. Robert Morrison's Mercedes sedan, traveling at high speed, suffered what appeared to be a catastrophic tire blowout on a curved section of road. The vehicle rolled 3 times before exploding into flames, burning so intensely that dental records would be required for identification. The first responders were federal agents in disguise. The crash investigation team was FBI. Even the coroner who pronounced Colonel Robert Morrison dead at the scene was part of the operation. By dawn, news reports were broadcasting the tragic death of a decorated military veteran and successful defense contractor, survived only by his daughter Isabella, currently hospitalized after her own tragic accident. At Austin General Hospital, Agent Rodriguez delivered the devastating news to Izzy with Academy Award-worthy grief. The tears that followed were entirely real, even knowing her father was alive. The legal death felt like losing him completely. Marcus Hayes received the news while eating breakfast in his penthouse, and his reaction was everything the FBI surveillance team could have hoped for. Relief, satisfaction, and the kind of cold calculation that would look damning to any jury. "Problem solved," he told Victoria, not knowing that federal listening devices captured every word. "The colonel's funeral should be quite moving. I'll need to play the grieving son-in-law to perfection. And after the funeral, we finish cleaning up loose ends. Izzy, without her father's protection, becomes much more manageable." The funeral of Colonel Robert Morrison drew hundreds of mourners, military colleagues, defense industry associates, and federal agents posing as family friends. Marcus played his role flawlessly, supporting his grieving wife while privately celebrating the elimination of his greatest threat. Izzy's performance was equally convincing because her grief was genuine. Watching her father's empty coffin lowered into the ground, knowing he was alive but unreachable, felt like death itself. But the real drama began after the funeral, when Marcus finally revealed the depth of his planning. Back at the penthouse, with Izzy physically weak and emotionally shattered, he produced documents that would have impressed Machiavelli with their thoroughness. "I've taken care of everything, darling," he said, spreading legal papers across their dining table. "Insurance policies, estate planning, medical power of attorney. With your father gone and your health so fragile, someone needs to make decisions for our family." The documents were masterpieces of legal manipulation. Marcus had used shell companies and phantom trusts to position himself as the sole beneficiary of Robert Morrison's estate while gaining complete control over Izzy's medical care and financial assets. If she signed, she would become a prisoner in her own life. "I don't understand all this legal language," Izzy said, playing the confused widow while memorizing every detail for later testimony. "That's why you have me," Marcus replied smoothly. "Trust me to handle the complicated stuff. You just focus on getting better." The papers included one particularly chilling provision, a medical directive authorizing Marcus to make end-of-life decisions should Izzy's condition deteriorate. It was a license to commit murder disguised as compassionate medical care. "I need time to think," Izzy said. Marcus's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "There's nothing to think about, darling. These are routine legal protections. Unless you don't trust your own husband." The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Sign the papers and become his victim, or refuse and face more direct consequences. But Marcus had made one critical error in his planning. He'd assumed Robert Morrison's death would leave Izzy completely isolated. What he didn't know was that his father-in-law had spent 3 days before his death putting additional pieces in motion. Dr. Sarah Mitchell arrived at the penthouse that evening with a medical excuse, checking on her friend's recovery progress, but actually carrying a device that would record every conversation in the apartment. Robert Morrison had contacted her before his disappearance, explaining the stakes in recruiting her as an active participant in bringing down Marcus Hayes. "How are you feeling?" Sarah asked, conducting a genuine medical examination while positioning recording equipment. "Tired," Izzy replied truthfully. "Marcus has been wonderful, but all these legal decisions are overwhelming." "What legal decisions?" Sarah's question was perfectly innocent, but designed to prompt Marcus into explaining his power grab on tape. For the next hour, Marcus detailed his complete plan for controlling every aspect of Izzy's life: her money, her medical care, even her ability to leave the apartment without supervision. He presented it as loving protection for a traumatized wife, but the FBI listening devices captured every word of what was clearly a kidnapping and financial fraud scheme. "I just want what's best for our family," Marcus concluded, his performance Oscar-worthy in its sincerity. "Of course you do," Sarah agreed, her medical training helping her maintain professional composure while documenting the ravings of a sociopath. After Sarah left, Izzy stared at the legal documents that would sign away her freedom. Tomorrow, she would have to choose between signing her own death warrant or triggering Marcus's more violent contingency plans. But for the first time since her fall down the stairs, she felt something approaching hope. Her father wasn't dead. Federal agents were building an ironclad case, and Marcus Hayes was about to discover that manipulating a military family required skills he'd never developed. The trap was set. Now they just had to spring it without getting killed in the process. The morning Marcus Hayes expected to complete his wife's legal enslavement began with news that shattered his carefully constructed world. Agent Rodriguez arrived at the penthouse with a search warrant and 12 federal agents. But that wasn't the devastating blow. The real damage came from what they'd found in Victoria Sterling's apartment. "Your business partner decided to cut a deal," Rodriguez announced as agents swarmed through Marcus's home office. "Complete cooperation in exchange for a reduced sentence. She's been quite helpful in explaining your organizational structure." Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath his feet like an earthquake. Victoria knew everything: bank accounts, cartel connections, the location of backup drives he'd thought were safely hidden. Worse, she understood his psychology well enough to anticipate every defensive strategy. "I want to speak with my attorney," Marcus said, watching agents photograph the legal documents he'd prepared to control Izzy's life. "Of course, but you should know that Ms. Sterling provided us with recordings of your conversations, including your plan to murder Colonel Morrison." Rodriguez held up a digital recorder. "Would you like to hear your own voice ordering the assassination of a federal witness's father?" The recording was damning. Marcus's voice clearly audible, discussing payment methods, timing, and backup plans if the highway accident failed. Worse, it captured his cold satisfaction when discussing the elimination of problems that threatened his operation. "The murder-for-hire charges alone carry life sentences," Rodriguez continued. "Add in the money laundering, drug trafficking, and conspiracy charges, and you're looking at multiple consecutive life terms." But Marcus Hayes hadn't built a criminal empire by accepting defeat gracefully. As agents executed their search warrant, his mind was already working through contingency plans that would have impressed his cartel partners with their ruthlessness. "Agent Rodriguez," Marcus said quietly, "I believe there's been some confusion about my wife's accident. Perhaps we could discuss this privately." The offer was subtle but clear information about federal investigative procedures in exchange for reconsidering his wife's testimony. It was the kind of corruption that had worked with Detective Thompson, but Rodriguez wasn't interested in negotiations. "The only confusion, Mr. Hayes, is your belief that you still have leverage in this situation. Your wife is under federal protection. Your business partner is cooperating. Your cartel connections are being rolled up by DEA task forces. You have nothing left to bargain with." Rodriguez was wrong about that last part, though she wouldn't realize it until later. As the search warrant execution continued, Marcus excused himself to the bathroom, a moment of privacy that federal protocols allowed even during arrests. What the agents didn't know was that the bathroom contained an encrypted communication device Victoria had installed for exactly this kind of emergency. The call Marcus made connected him directly to cartel leadership, bypassing all the usual intermediary layers. It was dangerous for everyone involved, but desperation made calculated risks irrelevant. "The operation is compromised," Marcus reported in Spanish, using phrases he'd learned during 2 years of laundering drug money. "Federal agents, cooperating witnesses, complete exposure." The response was coldly professional. "Understood. Cleanup protocols activated. All witnesses, all investigators, all problems eliminated within 24 hours. Including my wife, especially your wife. She knows too much to live." The call ended, leaving Marcus staring at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. In less than a day, he'd gone from successful entrepreneur to federal fugitive to dead man walking. The cartel's cleanup protocols didn't distinguish between compromised partners and expendable assets. Everyone connected to Hayes Development Solutions was now marked for elimination. But at least Izzy would die with him. There was something satisfying about that symmetry. Marcus returned to the living room to find agents cataloging evidence with methodical thoroughness. They'd found backup financial records, encrypted communication logs, and detailed plans for expanding the money laundering operation into new markets. Everything needed to convict him several times over. "Mr. Hayes," Rodriguez said, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, money laundering, and drug trafficking. You have the right to remain silent." The Miranda warning felt like a formality. Marcus Hayes had made his final play, gambling everything on the cartel's ability to eliminate witnesses faster than federal agents could protect them. It was a bet that would determine whether justice prevailed or if everyone who'd opposed him would die screaming. As handcuffs clicked around his wrist for the second time, Marcus smiled. "Agent Rodriguez, you might want to put my wife in protective custody. Tonight's going to be very dangerous for federal witnesses." The threat was clear, and Rodriguez felt ice form in her stomach. Cartel retribution was swift, brutal, and thorough. If Marcus had activated elimination protocols, Izzy Morrison Hayes had perhaps 12 hours to live. "What have you done?" Rodriguez demanded. "What needed to be done? If I can't have my wife, nobody can." The words echoed in the penthouse as agents hustled Marcus toward a federal detention facility. But his warning had already set other wheels in motion. Protective details scrambling to secure witnesses, safe houses being activated, and a race against time to prevent a massacre. In her hospital room, Izzy felt something shift in the air, like the pressure change before a tornado. Her father had taught her to recognize danger by its absence of obvious threats, the sudden quiet that meant predators were moving into position. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You have 6 hours to live. Use them well." The final battle for her life was about to begin, and this time there would be no federal agents or protective custody to shield her from a cartel that had just declared war on everyone who threatened Marcus Hayes' empire. The storm that had been building since the night of her fall was finally ready to break, and everyone in its path would learn why crossing criminal organizations was a mistake that few people lived to regret. 6 hours to live felt like both an eternity and an instant to Isabella Morrison Hayes as she processed the cartel's death sentence. Federal agents had moved her from Austin General to an undisclosed location, a safe house that felt more like a trap than sanctuary. Agent Rodriguez's assurances about protection rang hollow when facing an organization that had just declared open war on the entire investigation. "We've intercepted communications indicating multiple assassination teams converging on Austin," Rodriguez explained, her professional calm barely masking genuine fear. "The cartel is eliminating every witness, every investigator, everyone connected to the Hayes case." Izzy stared out the reinforced windows of the safe house, watching FBI surveillance teams position themselves around the property. "How many people are going to die because I found those files on Marcus's laptop? None of this is your fault. Marcus made these choices long before you discovered them." But guilt and logic rarely occupied the same space in a human heart. Izzy couldn't escape the feeling that her marriage to Marcus Hayes had painted targets on everyone she cared about: her father, Dr. Mitchell, even the federal agents now risking their lives to protect her. "There's something else," Rodriguez said quietly. "Your friend Dr. Mitchell was attacked leaving the hospital tonight. She's alive, but barely. Professional hit team, made to look like a random mugging." The words hit like physical blows. Sarah had been targeted because she'd helped install recording equipment, because she'd been loyal to their friendship when loyalty became dangerous. How many others would pay the price for Marcus's psychotic need for control? "I want to see him," Izzy said suddenly. "Absolutely not. Hayes is in federal detention under maximum security. Not Marcus. My father?" Rodriguez's expression shifted. The federal agent looked genuinely confused for a moment before understanding dawned. "You think your father is still alive?" "I know he is." Izzy met the agent's gaze steadily. "Military families develop certain instincts about death and survival. My father isn't dead, and I need to see him before the cartel succeeds where Marcus failed." The admission hung between them like a loaded weapon. Rodriguez had maintained the fiction of Robert Morrison's death even with his daughter, following protocols designed to protect ongoing operations. But faced with imminent threat to every witness, those protocols suddenly seemed inadequate. Even if that were true, Rodriguez said carefully, seeing him would compromise his security and yours. Agent Rodriguez, in approximately 5 hours, professional killers are going to breach this safe house and execute everyone inside. At that point, security protocols become irrelevant. The brutal honesty cut through federal bureaucracy like a blade. Rodriguez looked at her secure phone, calculating risks that had no good outcomes. Every choice led to death. The only variable was how many people died and in what order. If I could arrange such a meeting, Rodriguez said finally, what would be the point? Because I have information that might stop this. Something Marcus doesn't know I discovered. Something that could turn his own organization against him. 3 hours later, Isabella Morrison Hayes sat across from her father in a sterile conference room at an undisclosed federal facility. Robert Morrison looked every day of his 58 years, the stress of fake death and real danger etched into new lines around his eyes. I'm sorry about the funeral, he said quietly. Watching you grieve for me was the hardest thing I've ever done. You're alive. That's all that matters. Izzy reached across the table to squeeze his hand. But we need to talk about Victoria Sterling. Robert's expression sharpened. Military intelligence training recognized the tone that preceded crucial revelations. Marcus thinks she's cooperating with the FBI to save herself, Izzy continued. But I don't think she's motivated by self-preservation. I think she's in love with him. And everything she's doing is designed to help him escape. The implication was staggering. If Victoria Sterling was playing a deeper game, then her cooperation with federal authorities was a deception designed to flush out witness locations and security protocols. Every piece of information she'd provided could be accurate about the money laundering operation while being completely false about protective measures. You think she's feeding the cartel our locations, Robert said, his voice flat with certainty. I think she's been feeding them everything. Safe house locations, witness identities, federal response protocols. Marcus isn't facing execution by the cartel, he's orchestrating it. Robert Morrison pulled out a secure satellite phone, one that connected to communication systems Victoria Sterling had never seen. Within minutes, he was speaking with contacts in military intelligence who could verify or disprove his daughter's theory. The answer came back in less than 10 minutes. Victoria Sterling had indeed provided accurate information about Hayes Development Solutions' money laundering operation. But she'd also been caught in 3 separate lies about Marcus's personal communications. Lies that suggested active deception rather than simple misremembering. More damning, financial records showed Victoria had transferred significant funds to offshore accounts just hours before claiming to cooperate with federal authorities. She wasn't abandoning Marcus Hayes, she was helping him execute the greatest escape plan in criminal history. She's playing everyone, Rodriguez said when presented with the evidence. The cooperation was theater designed to identify witnesses and security protocols, which means Marcus knows exactly where we are right now. Izzy realized. The safe house suddenly felt like a kill box. Its security measures transformed into walls that would trap them when professional assassins arrived. Every federal agent, every witness, every person who'd opposed Marcus Hayes was now positioned exactly where he wanted them. How long do we have? Robert asked, his military training already shifting into tactical mode. Rodriguez checked her watch. Based on intercepted communications, less than 2 hours. Then we don't wait for them to come to us, Robert said grimly. We go to them first. The plan that emerged violated every federal protocol for witness protection, but conventional approaches had already failed. Instead of hiding from cartel assassins, they would position themselves where Marcus Hayes could see them and where his narcissism would demand personal involvement in their deaths. He won't be able to resist, Izzy said, understanding her husband's psychology with the clarity that comes from surviving his violence. If he thinks he can watch me die while proving how smart he is, Marcus will leave federal detention to finish this personally. It was a desperate gambit that relied on criminal arrogance overriding survival instinct. But after everything Marcus Hayes had taken from her, her baby, her ability to have children, her sense of safety in the world, Isabella Morrison Hayes was ready to bet her life on understanding the monster she'd married. The final confrontation was coming, and this time only one of them would walk away alive. The abandoned warehouse district of East Austin had once been the heart of the city's industrial economy, but now it served as a perfect killing ground for the final act of Marcus Hayes's criminal empire. At 2 in the morning, the area was deserted except for federal agents, cartel assassins, and a family that had been systematically destroyed by one man's ruthless ambition. Isabella Morrison Hayes sat in a folding chair at the center of the warehouse floor, seemingly helpless and alone under harsh industrial lighting. But appearances were deceiving. She wore a Kevlar vest beneath her hospital gown, carried a recording device that would broadcast every word to federal surveillance teams, and possessed information that could destroy Marcus's organization even if she died in the process. Her father waited in the shadows 50 yards away, armed with military precision weapons and the focused anger of a man who'd watched his daughter nearly die twice because of criminal greed. Agent Rodriguez and her team occupied strategic positions throughout the building, ready to respond when Marcus inevitably revealed himself. The waiting was the hardest part. Every sound could herald arriving assassins. Every shadow might conceal a sniper's rifle. Every moment brought them closer to either victory or death. But Izzy had learned patience from her father's military training in engineering projects that required years of methodical work. At 2:15, Marcus Hayes arrived exactly as predicted. He entered through the main doors like a conquering general, flanked by 2 cartel enforcers who moved with the efficient violence of professional killers. Federal detention had been no obstacle. Victoria Sterling's deception had provided exact details about transport schedules and security protocols, allowing Marcus to escape during a staged prisoner medical emergency. "Hello, darling," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the empty warehouse with practiced charm. "I told you we'd finish our conversation about those legal documents." Even now, facing certain death or life imprisonment, Marcus couldn't Hayes maintain the arrogant confidence that had built his empire. He genuinely believed he could talk his way out of any situation, manipulate any person, control any outcome through sheer force of personality. "I signed them," Izzy lied, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her system. "Everything you wanted. Complete power of attorney, medical directives, financial control. You win." Marcus smiled, but something predatory lurked behind his green eyes. "Do I? Because winning would mean you never discovered my business arrangements. Winning would mean your father never interfered with my operations. Winning would mean I could trust my own wife." He gestured to his cartel associates, men whose dead eyes reflected decades of violence. "These gentlemen are here to ensure there are no more complications. No more federal investigations. No more witness testimony. No more problems. The FBI knows everything," Izzy said. "Victoria Sterling's cooperation gave them complete details about your money laundering operation." "Poor Victoria." Marcus's laugh held genuine amusement. "Did you really think she betrayed me? Everything she told your federal friends was carefully crafted to lead them exactly where I wanted them, including this warehouse, tonight, with you positioned perfectly for elimination." The revelation hit like a physical blow. Victoria Sterling hadn't been cooperating with federal authorities. She'd been feeding them false information designed to gather all of Marcus's enemies in one location for mass execution. Every security protocol, every safe house location, every witness identity had been compromised from the beginning. "Surprised?" Marcus continued, moving closer with theatrical confidence. "Victoria and I have been planning this for months. Create a federal investigation, appear to be targets rather than criminals, then eliminate everyone who threatened our operation in a single night. By tomorrow morning, Hayes Development Solutions will be the victim of a tragic cartel retaliation that killed all the witnesses against us. It was a masterpiece of criminal strategy, used law enforcement's own procedures to position targets for elimination while maintaining the appearance of innocence." Marcus would emerge from the massacre as the sole survivor of a vendetta, free to rebuild his empire without federal interference. But Marcus Hayes had made one critical error in his planning. He'd underestimated the military family he'd chosen to destroy. "You know what the difference is between you and my father?" Izzy asked, standing slowly from her chair. "You see people as assets to be managed or problems to be eliminated. He sees them as human beings worth protecting." "Your father is dead," Marcus replied dismissively. "Car accident. Remember, very tragic. Completely unavoidable." "No," Robert Morrison said. stepping out of the shadows with a rifle trained on Marcus's chest. "I'm right here." The shock on Marcus's face was worth every moment of fake death and federal deception. His carefully constructed plan crumbled as he realized the central pillar of his strategy, eliminating Izzy's primary protector, had failed completely. "Impossible," Marcus whispered. "I heard the news reports, saw the funeral." "You saw what we wanted you to see," Agent Rodriguez announced, emerging from her concealment with a dozen federal agents. "The same way we've been feeding Victoria Sterling false information about our operations while she fed you false information about yours." The warehouse suddenly filled with FBI tactical teams, their weapons trained on Marcus and his associates. But the cartel enforcers weren't interested in surrender. They'd been paid to eliminate witnesses, and professional reputation demanded completion of contracted work. The firefight that followed lasted less than 30 seconds, but felt like an eternity. Federal agents and cartel assassins exchanged gunfire while Izzy pressed herself against a concrete support pillar, listening to bullets fragment against industrial fixtures. Her father's military training showed as he systematically eliminated threats with precision shots that would have impressed his old Special Forces instructors. When the shooting stopped, both cartel enforcers were dead, and Marcus Hayes knelt in a spreading pool of blood from a shoulder wound that had shattered his right arm. The man who'd built an empire through violence was finally experiencing its consequences firsthand. "It's over, Marcus," Izzy said, standing over her husband as paramedics worked to stop his bleeding. "The money laundering, the corruption, the violence, all of it ends tonight." Marcus looked up at her with eyes that still held defiant calculation. "You think this ends anything? There are dozens of operations like mine, hundreds of people ready to take my place. You've won a single battle in a war that will never end." "Maybe," Izzy agreed, "but you won't be part of it anymore." The trials that followed lasted 18 months and resulted in convictions that dismantled 3 separate criminal organizations. Marcus Hayes received 5 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. Victoria Sterling, faced with evidence of her deception, accepted a plea bargain that would keep her in federal prison until she was 80 years old. Detective Ray Thompson's corruption trial exposed police misconduct that led to reforms in law enforcement oversight. But for Isabella Morrison Hayes, justice wasn't found in courtrooms or prison sentences. It was found in the Sterling Hope Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provided support for domestic violence survivors who faced financially powerful abusers. The foundation's first office opened in Austin, funded by the seized assets of Hayes Development Solutions and staffed by people who understood that escaping dangerous relationships required more than good intentions. "We can't save everyone," Izzy told a group of women at the foundation's first support meeting. "But we can save each other, and sometimes that's enough to change the world." Dr. Sarah Mitchell, recovered from her injuries and serving as the foundation's medical director, watched her friend address the group with pride and amazement. The woman who'd once been pushed down a staircase by her criminal husband had transformed her trauma into a force for protecting others. "Any regrets?" Sarah asked afterward. Izzy considered the question while looking out at downtown Austin, where Hayes Development Solutions' former headquarters now housed a federal task force dedicated to investigating financial crimes. "I regret that it took so long to see who Marcus really was. I regret that other women suffered because I didn't recognize the warning signs earlier. But I don't regret fighting back." Colonel Robert Morrison, officially resurrected from his legal death, stood in the doorway listening to his daughter's wisdom with the pride of a man who'd raised a warrior. She'd lost more than anyone should have to lose, but she'd found something precious in the wreckage, the knowledge that survival wasn't enough, that true victory meant ensuring others never had to endure what she survived. Marcus Hayes had taken her baby, her ability to have children, and her sense of safety in the world. But he hadn't taken her capacity for hope, her ability to love, or her determination to build something meaningful from the ashes of destruction. That, ultimately, was the difference between them. He destroyed lives to build his empire. She transformed her destruction into something that would save lives for generations to come. The final victory belonged not to the man who thought power meant controlling others, but to the woman who learned that real power meant protecting them. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about prevention. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemy, but becoming someone they could never hurt again. And sometimes, from the darkest moments of human cruelty, emerge the brightest examples of human resilience. The Sterling Hope Foundation would help thousands of women escape dangerous relationships, its existence a permanent reminder that even the most sophisticated evil cannot ultimately triumph over determined goodness. Marcus Hayes had lost everything: his freedom, his empire, his future. But Isabella Morrison Hayes had gained something he could never touch: the knowledge that her pain had meaning, that her survival had purpose, and that love could be stronger than violence when it was channeled into protecting others. In the end, that was victory enough. This story proves that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one with the most money or the most connections. It's the one with the most to lose and the skills to do something about it. If Isabella's journey from victim to survivor inspired you, hit that like button to help others find this story. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever discovered something about someone you trusted that completely changed your relationship? And if you want more incredible true stories about ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Because sometimes reality is more gripping than any fiction Hollywood could create. Until next time, remember, the people who love you most are often the ones who'll go to the greatest lengths to protect you.